This video is funny because it stems from a prediction that I made that the further north we went in the northern hemisphere, the bendier and windier the roads would get. And the further south we went in the southern hemisphere, the straighter the roads would get. So I try not to take a conspiratorial approach to this topic because I just assume people have been wrong, not necessarily lying, but just wrong about the shape of the earth. But the more I look into this topic, the more I'm realizing there are a faction of people who have been hiding shit. And there are predictions to be made. If the Earth is bigger in the southern hemisphere, then if the Earth were a globe, they would need to stretch the north and compress the south. So, in order for the globe to match reality, they would need to make the northern hemisphere bigger and the southern hemisphere smaller, basically, so they'd match. But before we get into my new prediction, let's look at some other predictions that would be necessary if that were the case. So, number one, underwater sea cables. They say that 99% of the information between the continents are through underwater sea cables. Even the information between like South America and Australia, they go up and over and back down, which is a massive waste of money if the Earth were a globe. But on a flat Earth, they'd be too far apart. And what do you know? No underwater sea cables between continents. Number two, cruises. Okay, we we would predict that we would look for cruises in between the southern continents, but it'd just be too far and it'd be too obvious. And you look and voila, there are no cruises between the southern continents. There are plenty between the northern continents, but it's just too far in the southern hemisphere. Okay, number three, and this was one of my personal predictions. I knew that if I looked up the 24-hour record times between the northern races and the southern races, that there'd be a drastic difference, and it was even worse than I thought. It was like 711 miles in the north and 530 something miles in the south, and that's because in the north it's a shorter distance, and that's what we would expect or predict. That boat that I'm showing on the screen broke the record in the south. Look how fast he's going, and he only got 536 miles, I believe, in over a 24-hour period. So you mean to tell me that a race that's been going on for over 30 years with like all these boats in like 80 to 100 and something days per race, and there wasn't one day in the south to match the conditions to get a similar speed of those in the north? I call bullshit on that. But I pretty much knew I would find this. In prediction four, we would expect mariners to come out and blow the whistle on these times and these distances. And sure enough, they have. And this is the same guy, which leads into five. We would expect the sunrises and sunsets to differ from the north and the south. And this guy has over 100,000 nautical miles charted under his belt. And he is saying just that. And we hear that a lot, that the sun sets faster and rises faster in the south than the north. And one of my personal favorites, number six, how if we looked into it, I predict we would find them claiming that it's bigger in the south, because for people asking questions, they would have to claim, yeah, it's a little bigger in the south. So,
as a result of this major space effort, man has increased his knowledge of the universe. The Van Allen radiation belt was discovered. The Earth was found to be pear-shaped.
It's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
For one thing, the satellite does not revolve in a smooth ellipse around Earth. It would if Earth were a perfect sphere with uniform mass distribution. But instead, Earth has various bulges and...
Number seven, the time zones. We would predict that there would be more time zones in the south and gaps in the north.
The globe makes no sense. You have 19 time zones on the top of the globe, followed by 24 time zones between 40th parallel and the equator, and then below the equator you have 32 time zones.
And in the north, in this little region, there's 4 time zones. It's And it's right where the international date line is, where the days skip over. It's a perfect spot to stretch it out, which is what's necessary. And I don't think you'll find any flights in that red region right there. And number 8, the Antarctic Treaty. We would predict that travel would be restricted in areas where it would be obvious. So there's no free and independent exploration below the 60th south parallel. Okay, number 9. Another prediction we would make. We would predict that if we looked at some of the old captain's logs, we would find that the circumnavigation far south would be some crazy long distances.
So far, we've been told 37,560. We've been told 43,400. But if we just look at Pigafetta's own writing, where he says that land leagues are of 3 miles and sea leagues are of 4 miles. So that gives us 1460 times 4 is 57,840 miles. Yet we've seen other articles try and tell us 37, 47. It's actually 57,000 miles. Now when you look at the logbooks of Captain Cook, his logbook for his second journey was also 60,000 plus miles. You could look at the British Challenger expedition in the 1800s. That was also over 60,000 miles. So we should start being able to recognize a pattern here that obviously when we circumnavigate south of the equator, we are logging way too many miles.
So this brings me to my newest prediction, number 10. I predicted that the further north we went, the windier and curvier the roads would be, because they need to make the distances seem farther. So anything they can do. And then in the southern hemisphere, the further south, the straighter the roads would be in more straight lines. And it was way crazier than I thought. But this all stemmed from I'm at 30 north latitude roughly, and I-10 east pretty much spans the country, and I couldn't find a stretch of straight road, no more than 2 or 3 miles. It's just been windy, and it dawned on me that I need to check this out, and it was just crazier than I thought. And you could do this yourself. So what I did is I checked up further north, closer to like Pittsburgh area, going across toward the Great Lakes, and it's sure enough, the first thing I checked, it got even windier. So I'm checking the highways here, and not any of the smaller roads, just the main highways and interstates. And here's the logic. So they need to enlarge the northern hemisphere, but not so much, because even on an AE map it gets smaller as you get closer to the center, but mainly in the southern hemisphere. But they still have some room to add on, even on a globe, just to make it match the south. So in the southern hemisphere, they can't afford winds and bends in their highways and interstates, because people would catch on. They'd be like, wait, this is way further. But so next I go to South America, and I'm seeing all these windy lines, but then I realize, wait, them are just borders. All these windy lines. When you look in, the roads are straight. So I follow this road, and sure enough, I mean, it ain't completely straight, but I could pretty much, without reorienting my screen hardly at all, I can just scroll, just scroll, and even the bends and winds are pretty much straight lines, and I can just go clear across the continent. And all the roads that veer off left and right are all straight, and just clear across from one side of the continent to another by Argentina until I get to the mountains, and it's just straight lines. And I just kept checking. I checked Africa, same thing. I've seen a lot of windy lines, but you zoom in on them, and they're just borders. It seemed like they did that shit on purpose. Throw me off. I look on these on the windy lines, and they're borders, and then I go in and I find the roads, and sure enough, they just span the whole continent, South Africa, with minimal bends, just straight lines, just clear across. Look at this, and there's hardly any exceptions. I mean, everyone you check, it's crazy. It's ridiculous. I recommend everybody try this. It's insane. So you see, I'm in South Africa, and just pretty much go clear across. And so now I check North Africa, and I would expect it to be windy. And I find a major highway, and what do you know? It's windy. You know, all of them roads in the south are straight, and the north windy. And here it goes to the mountains, so you know I won't really say too much about that. But then it leaves the mountains, and it's even windier in the like looks like the farming areas, the flat areas. It's even windier. So North Africa, windy. South Africa, straight lines everywhere. It's crazy, man. It's just everywhere you look. I looked in Finland, and I mean, I'm just pretty much fast scrolling through this stuff, but you could double check it yourself. And so I look at these straight lines, and I'm trying to find straight lines like in the north, like in Canada, and I realize they're just all borders. I zoom in on them, and they're not even roads. They're borders. So it's almost like they did that to trick me. Or I almost glanced past it because I automatically seen windy roads in the south and straight looking roads in the north. But you zoom in, they're not even roads. So you zoom in on the north, and them straight lines are just borders and shit. And so this was northern Europe, and more of the same. Just the further north you go, the windier the roads. You know. But the main thing that surprised me was in the south. So then I go to and they have them straight lines that come to find out are borders. Then I went to back to South America. I'm like, I want to check the northern parts of South America. And what do you think I found? Windy roads in the northern part of South America, because that's how they've got to play it out. So that's why I'm starting to see. Look at this. Just I'm not making any of this shit up. It's very, very consistent. And I didn't find any exceptions. Like I tried to find a straight road in Canada. I thought I found one, and it turned out to be like a dirt road, and then it tied into a highway, and you see it's all curvy and shit. And I thought I found a straight stretch. It turned out to be like a dirt road, but it tied into a highway, and I was like, uh-oh, this is straight. Uh-oh, my theory, I'm not sure, but and then what do you think happened? Wah, wah, wah. Bitch starts whining and curving and splitting. So it's what you would expect if they're trying to make the north match the southern hemisphere. I mean, there's 10 predictions, so pretty much everything that would lead you to believe the southern hemisphere is larger, if you look into it, that's exactly what you find. It's our reality. And I want to check a little more into Australia. I didn't want to make too long of a video, but I did take a quick look into it, and it was pretty much more of the same, but maybe I'll do a future video. But I encourage everybody to go check this out yourself. Go far south and look at the roads. You won't find any windy roads, except for maybe in the mountains. But I hope you enjoyed.